Hello and welcome to this lesson. So today we will be doing one more of these detours and talk about something very important before we actually delve into and start developing our product. And what we will be talking about is product compliance. And this is something that oftentimes falls between the cracks when you're developing a product because you have so many other things to think about. But it's a topic that's very important to think about from the beginning so that you choose the right product to develop. And to discuss this topic, I have an absolute expert with me who I'm very honored to bring on, and that is Casper ter Horst. Casper ter Horst, he's the managing director at a company called ProductIP, who works exactly with this. They help companies get all of the necessary compliances and certifications for the European market. And Casper, he has literally decades of experience in his field, and he has worked with huge companies such as IKEA and Walmart to get compliance for products that have been produced in millions and millions of exemplars. And some of the things that we will be discussing are common recall reasons, product certification cost, how to lower product certification cost, and just in general how to deal with factories in this respect. And with that, let's jump into the interview and listen to what Casper has to say. I'm joined by Casper ter Horst, who is the co-founder and managing director at ProductIP. And ProductIP helps companies deal with product compliance in a structured, efficient, and proactive way, make the right choices for suppliers and raw materials, secure the quality of your product range, and control cost and mitigate risks at the same time. Did I get all of that right, Casper?
Yes, that's correct. Yep. We help companies to deal with that complex framework of non-food products. Yeah.
Perfect. Do you mind just giving a little bit of background on your history with product compliance?
Sure. I'm built in 1966, and I'm a construction mechanical engineer by profession. Studied production technology, and I had my first jobs at what is now called DECRA, but at that time was called KEMA Certification Institute in the Netherlands. So we tested all kind of products, household products, electronic products, switching gear, for the EU market, but also had we're an agent for CSA and UL in America, so we did tests for the North American market as well. And after a couple of years, I changed into to the other side of the table and started working for a OEM manufacturer, Taiwanese company with factories in China, and we were producing OEM private label for the large companies in the world, from IKEA to Walmart, from Kmart to all kind of DIY stores in the Netherlands and Europe. And we were responsible for basically their brands because we were producing always for the customer brand. To give you an idea, we had 7 plants, 5,000 people. We produced for IKEA millions of mechanical timers a year. We had year on year the extension reels for Walmart. It was really one of the big players in the market. And at that time, I already noticed that many of our customers didn't have a Casper on their side. It's merely trade. It's a very small group of people that are very active with the suppliers and taking care of the orders, and the administration part that belongs to compliance was often forgotten. So the documents were there, but when questions came from others in the supply chain or customs that needed documents, then they likely would go back to us and say, Casper, can you resend the documents again? So I thought we should help companies organize with that part. Yeah? Most of the companies are very organized between the warehouse and the shop. People buy things, and when they leave the cash register, then the warehouse starts to move, and new supplies move into the shop. But all the documents that come with non-food products for regarding compliance, they need to come from various parties. They need to be on the right time in the right place. Sometimes they need to be in a certain format. It requires a different kind of automation. And I ran into my old chef in 2008, Martin van der Dussen, old chef from KEMA. And within 15 minutes, we came up with the idea of ProductIP to create a solution for retail and trade, for manufacturing, retail and trade, and to take the complex layer of legislation out of the equation and let people start dealing with this with something they know. It's called a product. This moment we have an office in Holland. That's the head office. We have an office in Hamburg, in Augsburg near Munich. So 2 offices in Germany. From day one, we have an office in Shenzhen and in Hong Kong. So we are not only the help desk for people using our web-based solution. We can also be secretariat. So you can outsource some of the work if you don't have the hands or the time for that at this moment.
Right.
And it's enjoyable to do that now for 12, close to 12 years ago. We switched on the system to live, and it's an international world. The focus is Europe mainly. We have the solution can be used for other markets, but the European framework for product compliance is pretty clear and pretty neat compared to other regions. So.
Thank you so much for that introduction. What struck me about ProductIP when I was looking for certification information for first and foremost was that it really, I feel like, empathizes and understands the position of somebody who is not very well versed in compliance already. So somebody who's starting out with basically zero knowledge, perhaps a lot of engineering knowledge, but not a lot of knowledge around compliance. And I like the idea of just simplifying that very complex legal structure into something that we can understand.
Right.
And in this little chat, I want to take the quite genuine position of somebody who is very naive to compliance. And I'm just going to be asking some questions from the perspective basically of a small startup that perhaps has less than 10 people and they maybe know a lot about engineering, a lot about software, but for them compliance is just a void, so it's something that needs to be done, but they don't really know where to start. With that, the first thing I wanted to ask is, at what stage in the development of an electronic product should one start work on compliance? So let's imagine a project that is in very early stages, so perhaps it is not clear yet that there is market potential, so the company doesn't want to invest a lot of money yet. So let's imagine that case. When does one start?
That's a very good question. I would even skip the word electronic because it's relevant for any product. We see also a lot of things appear on Kickstarter, and because we look from a risk point of view, we sometimes see an idea and think that is impossible. The idea itself is not bad, but the way they want to realize it is impossible. And the thing is that you need to start taking compliance into the equation from day one. Not to kill the idea, but sometimes it forces you to adapt the idea or to realize the idea with a certain material or a certain safety concept. Or it's feasible, but it will limit your market. And it doesn't include any cost at that moment, but you need to be clear what kind of regulations are touched by the idea, by the concept, by the design. And that already creates like a bubble. This means I need to consider the fact that in the aftermarket, the product needs to be able to be recycled. That is very relevant for me. Not sure how yet, but you need to just tick those boxes. I think that the designer themselves, when they see the regulation, it's an aha. It's an aha experience. Okay. All right, I can understand that. I can read what it is. It's English or it's in German, but it's mostly in English. Okay, I can understand the concept. Never thought that this kind of regulation was relevant for this kind of product. But now that I know it, I can see trouble on the road, or no, I can deal with that, or I need to find a specific partner for it, and this will delay the schedule. And so I would say take it into the equation from day one. But that doesn't involve any testing or any, it's just gathering knowledge, basically. It's part of the specification sometimes. Yeah.
I see. So you mentioned you see Kickstarter projects that are basically impossible from day one. If I'm starting off on a Kickstarter, where should I start looking for information, or how should I go about it to make sure that I'm not marketing something that actually won't be possible to create?
Well, you talk here about non-food consumer products. An electronic product is also a non-food consumer product, and I think that you can say that the driver of creativity in the non-food products is often a combination of ideas. So, for example, you have a contactless charger, a Qi charger. And now you created a piece of furniture that you had already, and you add that charger into that. What now changes? Is it now a charger that works as a desk, or is it the desk that works as a charger? What is the consequence of adding a module, a functionality, modular part to another function? Because in a non-food, creativity means combination of ideas, often existing ideas. I'll give you an idea for a Kickstarter project that we saw a few years ago, where somebody had an idea of creating all kind of accessories and bags from old bicycle tubes, the inner tubes of bicycles. Maybe they got inspired by the idea of making bags from the outer layers of truck coverings, which is completely different. But the inside of a bicycle bike, a tube, this material, this rubber, is not intended to be touched by skin for a long time. From the materials choice, whatever you make of it that results in touching of skin for a long time, creates a no-go, unless you can process it, grind it, wash it, but then probably the idea is gone. So I think you need to look at it from that perspective. You need to start to understand what kind of regulations are touched by your idea and by your concept. And for example, you have a design in mind for a shape. You have a shape in mind, and you have an idea of how to power the product in mind. But if you realize that for this product a certain recycling requirement is in place in the aftermarket, but you realize this at a stage where you already made the designs of the tooling, or maybe already have the tooling, and then you realize, my God, this product cannot be taken out as intended by this regulation for recycling. Damn, it has nothing to do with the shape, but where you put the cutting guides, or where you put the cutting lines, or do I need to have screws, or this kind of things. You need to start to understand that concept. And the trouble is that as a consumer, you probably assume that compliance regulation these days are always related to safety. Like with electronic products, you put a plug into the wall socket, there's no big spark, no big explosion, no fire, no flames. Okay, this probably is a safe product. And if these kind of events happen, it's probably not good. But these days, product compliance are about entirely different things. Standby current, recycling, certain materials that can no longer be used. It is a complete different world with aspects that you and I as a consumer rarely notice in a product, but are still very relevant. And that makes it complex. Food, something is wrong with food, you get sick immediately. Something is wrong with non-food, the user probably never know. And that is why this world of compliance for non-food products, I feel, is actually more complex than for food.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So if I try to summarize very quickly what you said about how to think when you're, for example, doing a Kickstarter project, step one, I guess, would be to kind of identify which type of product it is. So try to figure out which category.
Or a mix. Like in ProductIP, you can select various products, and we merge the set of requirements into a checklist. And then you see on the header, hey, I need to follow EMC kind of aspects, or electrical safety aspect, or chemical safety. So you need to identify the main topics first, not even the detailed standard, but the main topics first.
Identify the main topics and then start doing your own research to just at least have a little bit of a sense of what this product should be doing. For example, if those guys who were doing the bike tire bags had done that, they would probably have seen right away, that they need to change their idea somehow.
Exactly, yes.
Cool. So then the next question I have is, if we imagine the case of an electric product that is an intentional radiator, how much should one budget for certification for the US market? And then the same question, but for the EU market. And again, it's difficult to give a very exact number here, right? But let's imagine just a ballpark figure to present to a VC firm or something like that.
Yeah, I think you can identify basic products that have not a lot of integrated circuitry and not a lot of IOs, maybe even battery operated, so it has a low power. I think you'll be ready with 5 to 10K easily.
Okay.
And that includes like a pre-test of a prototype and then come back for some final testing. The moment it becomes more complex, you easily run into 15 to 20K.
And what would be something that makes a product complex?
A lot of integrated circuitry, high frequencies inside, a lot of IOs. That makes things more complex.
All right.
Interfaces and integrated circuitries, high clock frequencies. This make things very complex.
Okay, so about 5 to 10K for simple products and 15 to 20 for more complex ones.
Right. You can control the cost a little bit, Tony, when you start to look for modular parts that have already some pre-approval or have proven to be pre-approved in other products. That helps. Like a Bluetooth module, you won't probably design that. You will buy that PCB and follow the instructions how to mount it into the total concept.
Yeah, that actually brings us very nicely to another question I had here, which is, what are some ways through which businesses can reduce their certification cost when developing electric products?
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the main ways to reduce certification costs for an electronic product is take the power supply out of the product. There are so many companies that are specialized in producing power supplies, and they can do it in a large volume, and they know how to follow the regulations for that part, and they can give you the low voltage output that you need for the functional part of the product. The moment you integrate the power supply into your product, you're creating a high voltage product, and that is really a different cost perspective. And also, in terms of materials that you need to use, it creates risk. If you take the power supply out of the equation, you also create flexibility. There are many people that make power supplies. There's competition there. You could have different options to buy from different markets. You could have a low voltage product designed and buy USA approved and European approved power supplies, or even other regions, and still have a product that runs on 5-volt or 10-volt or 12-volt DC. Take the power supply out of the equation when you can.
All right, that's very actionable advice. And if we have a product with an integrated rechargeable batteries, which many products are today, are there any general advice that one can take to try to reduce the certification cost there?
The integrated battery, well, you come back to recyclability. You want the battery to be able to get out of the product, like a battery pack. A battery pack is better than an integrated product. The battery pack gives you flexibility. Again, there's many people that make batteries. There's many people that can make a battery pack. The moment you integrate the battery into the design, you need to be able to facilitate that the battery gets out of the design.
So if one keeps the battery as a separate component that can be taken out, that simplifies everything, right?
Exactly. This is the same as if you use standard batteries like AA batteries or 9-volt blocks, then you actually are doing the same. But I would always emphasize, you are not a battery expert. The moment you you bring the battery inside the product, you become an importer or a manufacturer of something that is also have a battery. But if you buy the battery from another brand, you might even follow a standard module that is already on the market. You profit from high volume, you profit from expertise, you profit from the fact that one that is making batteries is probably going to constantly develop battery material. You even probably will profit from future efficiencies of that. I would see the battery as a power supply. Try to take it out of the main design and make it like a click-on modular part.
All right, yeah, that's really good advice. And like you say, apart from the reduced certification cost, that gives increased flexibility as well to negotiate with suppliers and to lower cost and make your product better. Exactly,
and you are most likely to find a supplier that is an expert in making a product with the functionality that you are looking for. But it's not necessarily that this functionality expertise means this supplier is also an expert in making batteries or verifying the quality of batteries, or is an expert in power supplies and verifying the quality of power supplies. So what you do is you separate these in different modules, in different module projects. You will source the power supplies and the batteries. You will get multiple sources. You can even negotiate the pricing, and you say to your final vendor, I don't care which of these batteries you buy. You can buy any of them, and you can even get the 10% extra on this negotiated price that I have in your final product calculation. But I want a copy of your purchase order because I want to be able to audit second tier. And this is also spreading risks, because if they change a battery inside a product, how the hell are you going to see this, and how the hell are you going to monitor that? You need to be involved, and this is what I learned that time from IKEA too. You can design a lot of desk lighting for IKEA, but you cannot choose your own cord switch lamp holder factory. They are there. IKEA has all of them, and they are right. These are basic standard components. The design of your lamp is not influenced by the cable that is on that. But the risk of the lamp is basically in that cable. So the moment you start to think modular, you get what you say. You get flexibility also. If one factory has some capacity issues, you can create second sources. And when your business grows, it becomes more interesting to get better pricing, negotiation on these products. If you divert to a new market, you can instantly switch to another approved power supply. These are giving you great advantages.
Perfect. Yeah, that's very good advice, and like I say, very actionable as well. Then one question here, if we go back to thinking about electronic products for a second, and again, the reason why I keep bringing that product category up is because I feel like that is one of the more demanding types of products to certify, to make compliant, right? Would you agree with that?
It's mostly in the focus of people, but it's actually not the most recalled product category.
Interesting.
Yeah. Actually, apparel is one of the most recalled product categories, and jewelry is also highly recalled. So, but for a consumer, you would see electrical associated with risks.
Yeah, exactly. I want to say it feels like electrical are on everybody's mind as something that is risky. What are some common sources for apparel recall and jewelry recall?
Always chemicals, because whilst you are thinking about the risk of electronic products, you are sitting in painted materials all day. So there's skin contact with apparel all day. And this could be azodized chemicals in colorants. This could be chromium-6 in leather products. This could be cadmium or nickel or lead in jewelry. And these are long-term risks and not immediately risks like an electrical shock. So the risk is higher when the end user doesn't see the risk. That the risk becomes higher because you're poisoning yourself over a long time.
Very,
Yeah.
very
But
interesting.
I do agree. I do agree with if you ask people, if you put products on the table, they will immediately pick the electrical product as a high risk item because you can get a shock.
Yeah,
But
with
nobody
the
gets it.
electronics, it's apparent when something goes wrong, right? There's smoke
Yeah.
or there's fire, something explodes. But
Yeah.
if you're poisoning yourself, like you say, slowly through a bracelet that you bought, then that's almost worse
Yeah.
because you don't really
Cheap and not
notice.
cheerful. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Would you say electrical shock is the most relevant risk for an electrical product?
You're asking me?
Yeah. Why not? Huh?
Well, good question. And I would say no, and I would say no because I'm thinking most products don't work in a voltage range or a current range where electrical shock could cause very serious harm. I would say perhaps electromagnetic interference is of a higher concern. But what does the expert say?
Yeah, EMC, electromagnetic compatibility, could be a recall reason, but it is not always a visible risk for the end user. Fire is a common risk for electrical products, even for battery operated products, especially when they lack protection against overcharging. That's an understatement. Especially, most products get a battery and we charge them when we are not there. So the risk for fire, if we are having a barbecue and we have an electrical grill, the risk of an electrical grill going on fire, we are there.
Yeah.
I don't care if it goes on fire. I'm there. I'll pull the plug in. But we charge our hoverboard and we charge our power banks and we charge our watches and we charge our telephones and we charge our lighting and we put them on a charge and we go to bed.
Yeah.
Or we leave them on the charge and go shopping. So the risk of products still working when you are not there is quite high. The risk of products that switch on automatically, like heaters, or that operate by thermostat or air conditionings, or that we leave on and then go away from home, like laundry dryers, washing machines. Those products have a higher risk, and fire actually is the most common risk for electronic products and not electrical shock, because we have also very good earthing normally, and we have these residual switches that cut off the power immediately when there's leakage current that goes too high. You seldom hear of people getting an electrical shock, but you read about fires.
That's very true. You mentioned before that some of the most common recall reasons for non-electrical products would be toxicity. What would be some common reasons for electronic product recalls, in your experience?
Yeah, also chemicals. Yeah. Many electronic products we wear or we carry or we have in our hand. So skin contact is one of the transition routes for chemicals, and that is one common route. We have limits for electronic products for the recycling industry. So these are chemicals that are not a risk for you and me as a daily user. But if we are involved in recycling electronic products every day, we want to limit the materials in these products because we are otherwise exposing labor people in these industries. Then you talk about heavy metals like cadmium and mercury and lead, and we talk about flame retardants, bromide-based flame retardants. And recently we also talk about 4 different phthalates that we are reducing. These are often forgotten, and we tend to forget the group of chemicals which is called POP, and these are persistent organic pollutants. This is not a family of chemicals like that phthalates are a family of softeners. Persistent organic pollutants is a group of different chemicals that have one property that makes them into a family, and that is takes a very, very long time to get out of the system that is called planet Earth. It has like a half-time sometimes of 100,000 years. So you have a kilo of something. After 100,000 years, you still have 500 grams.
Wow.
And some of these components, like SCCP, it's a softener and a flame retardant as well. And there are recalls of products having 0.1 or 0.2% weight on weight in a part of SCCP. You will definitely get a recall. And I would say the focus, if you look at the electronic products, the main focus of everybody for product compliance is, the separation between the mains and the low voltage part, etc. Listen, people making transformers every day. You think they really don't know how to make clearances and creepages and insulation? This is what they do. But now you need to pick a kind of a material when you want to have a rubber part there and a handle here and a grip there. What kind of material is that? And now some customer asks for a certain color variation. What kind of colorant is that? And that color, is it considered to be suitable for skin contact or not? And the guys focusing on the electronic part, they don't focus on that chemical world because they feel it was never relevant. We never get a complaint of that. No, true. No consumer ever goes back with a shower curtain and said, hey, there's 0.2% SCCP in this shower curtain. I think I should trade it for a new one. But bloody well, there's a recall for shower curtains with 0.2% SCCP in there. My God, how can this be? So, back to question one, when you should start with product compliance, when you tick those boxes and you look at chemical legislation and chemical legislation for electronic products for recycling, then suddenly they are on the list, and then that means they're also on the agenda when you start to look at requests that you get from the market. Hey, we got a request for this feature or this color. Then you say, that's fine, but somewhere on the checklist is a bullet saying compliance with this legislation, this and this. It needs to pass that station. At the moment you have that checklist, you prevent yourself from getting it. Yeah? Because there's no scarcity. There's plenty of suitable colorants. There's plenty of suitable materials.
Yeah, thank you for that very detailed response.
It's not that they're not there. People tend to forget those aspects. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I think many people hearing this will be surprised that the chemical part plays such a big part of recalls and is such a common problem. But it's very
I can give you
interesting to
hands-on advice for electronics, for example. Lead in solder is already an issue for 15 years. And we still see product designs where some wire needs to be soldered on a SMD PCB. So you have a completely automated printed circuit board. No, there's no lead in that solder because it's wave soldering machines and this is all running smoothly. Then it comes into a factory and now you have mass production and there comes a plug and a cable and somebody says, yeah, we need to solder this wire on this PCB. God damn, that is difficult to do with a machine. We need to do it by hand. Have you tried to solder by hand without lead in solder? It's complex. It's terrible. Get terrible quality. Get no production speed. You cannot blame a factory to try to massage in some of this not lead-free solder into the production. But if you get caught, you cannot sell the product.
Wow. Yeah.
But why you don't design it with a connector? Yeah, it's cost. No, it's not cost. You save yourself risk. It's idiot-proof. You can test connections in connectors. You can click them on PCBs. You can wave solder the female and male parts on the products. You can machine the wire ends into a connector, and you can click it onto production. But this is cost. If you have people in your whole project team that still see these kind of things as cost rather as preventing of risk, these people are the real risk. You need to really think in systematic and automated way. And if they don't solder by hand, then you have no risk for hand soldering. You don't have any risk for lead in solder. You don't need to check during production. You don't need to have it on your pre-shipment inspection. Take out the risk by design. That is what you probably do with EMC as well. Take the risk out by design, by default. Get it out.
Yeah, I think for many companies, a large-scale product recall basically is the closure of their business, especially for smaller companies that are just starting out. So to
Yeah.
invest into having proper connections and avoiding lead, even if just a little bit, and to not have any risk for recall, I think that is really something worth investing in, right?
Absolutely.
Just moving on to some of the pre-selected questions I have here.
Sure. Sure.
So that we get through all of them before you have to go. I want to ask, what are some of the major differences between the CE mark and the FCC mark?
It's a completely different world.
Yeah.
FCC is, you could compare FCC partly with the electromagnetic compatibility regulations in Europe. So it's focusing on interference with other products. Mm-hmm. So being able to have multiple electronic products in a room and they still need to function properly. The CE certification as such doesn't exist. Not a certification in the sense that it is a third-party certification. It's a self-declaration. And you cannot, as an owner of the company, sign on each product that you declare this product complies with the essential requirements of all applicable legislation. So you sign it on a paper, which is called a DOC, Declaration of Conformity, or a CE declaration, and you put the CE mark or marking on the product. It's also not a mark in the sense that it is owned by somebody. So so it's not certification as such. The FCC part and the EMC part is also different because in Europe, with electromagnetic compatibility, we look at emission and immunity, both conductive and radiated, and the scope of FCC is not as complete as the scope of the European EMC department. So if you start with FCC and then go to Europe, I would say you go the other way around.
You mean that it would be easier to start with CE and go to FCC, or?
It's easier to go for electromagnetic compatibility compliance for the European market, and in that process try to achieve compliance with FCC than the other way around.
Okay, got you. And so CE mark is something that one has to self-certify, or how does one call it, self-present?
Yeah, self-certification.
Yeah. I'm thinking, how does one go about CE self-certification without having an expert on staff? So where does one start? Because there's, like you say, a lot of complex laws around it. So somebody who's just an engineer will probably not really know how to even start self-certifying. Yeah,
it is actually a formal process. You need to look at the product and the way it's intended to be used and expected to be used in the market. And based on that, you need to make a short list of the applicable legislations that applicable because of the function of this product and the application of the product. And then within those legislations, you need to look at what are the harmonized standards, what are the standards that everybody agrees on. Okay, these standards cover the main risk of the product. And then you need to follow what is in those standards to find out is the product really compliant. How to do that if you don't have staff? Well, the trouble is how to monitor all the changes in that legislation. I wouldn't recommend doing that. Actually, it's the existing right of ProductIP that is there. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to deal with self-certification if you don't have an expert? Yes, if you have an expert system. Because as the expert should not focus on what is happening with legislation, but should focus on what is the consequence of things happening to the product that I have. Mm-hmm. And that is a different focus. It's the same like if you read the newsletters of all the laboratories, it's very interesting to read all those changes. But then you look into your showroom and you think, okay, what products are actually affected by this change? I have no idea. The advantage of the expert system that we as ProductIP offer is that because you have gone through certain steps in the beginning and identified with what aspects of the product are relevant for that legislation, we make that equation for you. So we monitor the changes in the legislation, and automatically the relevancy of requirement lists tied to products change because somebody in Brussels make a decision. And sometimes something changes that you have never ever focused on. And something new pops up. So is it possible without a compliance expert? Yes, it is possible. You don't need to be a product compliance expert in the sense that you need to be an expert that we have, but you need to be able to understand, comprehend what is in a standard. You need to be able to read some kind of level of technical English and convert that into design rules for the product.
Okay.
So I think it depends a little bit what you define as a compliance expert.
Yeah, that is very true. I guess
a compliance responsible person. You need to assign somebody in your organization that is responsible for product compliance, for the agenda of product compliance.
Yeah. So even
Absolutely.
if they are not an expert, as in having worked years with compliance, they will be responsible for gathering all the relevant compliances and the kind of monitoring so that the product fulfills all of them.
Exactly. And one of the things that we have done is to try to convert this complex legislation also in easy to understand 1 or 2 pages documents that say, okay, now that I've read this and understand it, what is the real impact? Step 1, step 2, step 3. What can I prepare? What do I need to look for? Bring it back to things that you actually know in daily life. Okay, it has to do with marking. You need to have marking on products. Okay, that means labeling. Okay, that I understand. I understand labels, and I understand that I don't need to design my own. Okay, I need to monitor that, or I need to understand we are using glue, so I need to understand what glue we use, and for using that we need to find this kind of document. It's a lingo. It's a lingo that you need to understand. Information is there in the supply chain. You need to learn to ask the right questions, and that's kind of a language. When you started in your world, you also didn't know that PCB meant printed circuit board, right?
Nope, I did not.
But now for you, this is like a term that is natural. So it's lingo. MSDS, Material Safety Data Sheet. What is it? Why is it relevant? What is the position? And to understand that, you need to be able to understand things on a certain level. So you need to have a certain level of intelligence to see that. But it doesn't necessarily need to be a compliance expert on day one.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that answer. Product IP, I think from what I have seen, it looks like a very good shortcut for somebody who maybe doesn't have the time or just doesn't have the energy to become familiar with all of these terms. So it kind of simplifies this lingo that we're talking about into something that a person not familiar with that can actually understand and kind of take action upon, which again is why Product IP really attracted me in the first place. Then just moving on, a couple more questions here that I think many people starting off have. And the next one I have here is, can a prototype be used for getting products certified? And if so, to which extent? Because as we understand, if one has finalized the tooling for a product and is already ready to make injection molds of something, and only then
hardened already.
Exactly.
Late.
And only then starts thinking about certification, and then a change needs to happen to the casing, let's say, then that will be a very expensive change because all of the tooling needs to change. So can we get around this problem of revisions by using prototypes instead for certification?
The answer is you should do that. Absolutely. It's a must.
Yeah.
This is true cost saver. The real cost is always in modifications and change in the final stage, where the tooling is ready or the time is run out and the market is screaming for product. Do it in an early stage. Rapid prototyping is there. 3D printing is there. You have the drawings. Why should people measure creepages and clearances on a prototype they can check the dimensions of a drawing to see if the clearances and creepages are there. You could even 3D print electronic components on a PCB to make clear how the look and feel would be. I would always invest more in that part, and that time that you invest there, you easily win at the end again. Especially for EMC, you can do a lot of tests with prototypes, a lot. For the electrical safety, many tests can be done in a prototype as well. I think that the temperature rises of certain surfaces, etc., you can measure with prototyping. I think the only thing that you cannot do is mechanical strength, because you don't have the final materials. I definitely would do prototyping. Very, 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 very experienced. Yeah. Start with prototyping on EMC at a very early stage. Because you might find yourself that you need to reroute something on a PCB, or you need to reroute a wiring because it acts like an antenna, or you need to put a coil somewhere to cut out disturbances. And understanding that will give you space. So start with the PCB layout and your initial ideas of the housing that you have, and go for a EMC quick scan on the most those guys in the lab will know the most tricky test. You might think that you pay relatively a lot for that initial scan compared to a complete scan, but it will buy you so much more time and save you so much more money, and you won't realize how much cost you have saved because you will not spend that money. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds very logical. And you say do EMC testing early. Is there does the casing oftentimes affect the EMC tests? So, for example, if I'm using a cast casing out of polyurethane, can that affect the EMC test in some way that will change once we have an injection molded case?
Hardly.
Okay.
Only if you have metal parts that can act as an interference or antenna. No, I would say that it's not any issue. It's in these high frequency time that we are living. This casing is not existing. It goes straight through. I would say PCB with IOs, you can even go there without a casing. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that depends on the type of product you're doing and for which industry it is. And then for the
only thing is, if you're designing something with the power supply inside the casing, then it's a different product again.
Yeah.
So keep the mains out of the product saves you a lot of headaches.
If it is inside the casing, then we get into UL certification, right? And assuming that we're not using a pre-certified adapter, what would the cost for UL certification be approximately?
My advice would be don't do that.
Okay.
Don't do that. Buy a UL recognized switch mode power supply on a PCB or plug-in part. Don't go to that route. Why? There would be millions of different vendors that have the experience. It will cause a lot of delay. It will be very, very costly. And the moment something changes in legislation, the cost that you will have will come back to the quantity of your power supply rather than the total quantity of the manufacturing of the power supplies of a second-tier supplier. They will know it in advance. They will move away from a certain material and move to another material. I would recommend to stay out of getting into the power supply business, unless making a power supply is your business. But then again, very costly.
Very costly.
Very costly. Yeah, 25, 30K.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Especially if you also have plug parts.
If I have plug parts.
If it's an adapter type, a plug-in type,
right?
You need to comply with the plug requirements, and you're probably going global, which means you need to have all kind of tumble barrel tests and plug-in, plug-out sequencing tests for all kind of countries, unless you buy a casing that have an approved plug part.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think you're advice here is loud and clear. Just don't do that and stay to ready-made power solutions.
Yeah, don't be vain on that.
Yep.
Others are very good in that.
And then
it's a very very basic function to supply power.
Exactly, and it's like reinventing the wheel, right? To try to do that yourself.
It's a commodity. You just see it as a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
We need plastic granulate for molding. Okay, we need a power supply. Okay, let's find a good one.
All right. Understood. And then one of the final questions before we wrap up here: what are the most common errors you see hardware businesses committing around certification? And it's a very broad question, and I guess to narrow it down a little bit, again, we can try to focus on the electronics space, because I think many of my God, I'm losing the word, of my audience, thank you, of my students, I wanted to say, they will be developing some kind of electronic product. So if you could just give a quick rundown, kind of a bullet point style thing of some common mistakes in that space.
When they go around certification, okay, well, we already mentioned various aspects. I think one of the aspects that they forget is the aftermarket part. So don't only focus on the use of the product, but also in these days, things like eco-design, energy usage, recycling. It's very important. These are not aspects that you certify, but influence the design and the material choices. When it comes to certification, I see sometimes a procedural error. They find an OEM partner that helps them to manufacture the product, and they let that OEM partner take care of the certification. And then they pay the OEM partner. So you have a factory, and the factory submits the product for certification, and the factory pays for that certification and gets a report in their name, and you pay the factory. But the factory is the customer of the laboratory. That means the factory can change and get a site certificate, or change the design and make a module and get a second test based on the first test. You need to pay the laboratory. The factory needs to supply samples to the laboratory and can participate in getting the product into compliance. But you pay the laboratory. You own the report. Your name is on it. And the factory name is there on the report as a production location, not as the owner of the test report, not as the owner of the certificate, not as the owner of EMC test, not as the owner of chemical test. You own the test.
That is a very interesting point, because I can imagine it would be very tempting for people starting out with this to kind of get all of this out of your head and just let the factory do it. But after hearing what you say about those consequences where you are not really the owner of that certification, that seems like a very bad strategic choice, like you say.
Exactly. Because you will find yourself maybe move to another factory and you want to reuse the report, but you don't own the report. Yeah, but you say, but it's my product. But the factory will say, no, I don't know you. I only know the one who paid. Having said that, there are many factories that are very helpful and getting the best quotes of that. It's just a matter of making clear who's going to pay, who's going to release the order. Yeah? So that is really an important one in that whole process. And another thing around certification is what people tend to forget is the marketing part of it. How are you positioning the product in the market? What kind of claims do you write on packaging? What kind of claims are you maybe initiating by artwork? You know, I always use the example. If you see a guy on scaffolding and he's having shoes, are these working shoes or not? So you're selling shoes and you have an image of a guy on scaffolding on it. You have made those shoes working shoes, even if they're just sandals. You need to understand that sometimes you write a product or you market a product in a certain way, and you make it a toy, not because you intended to have it a toy in initial. So when you talk about certification, also include intended use. It's more like a marketing aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Is it senior market? Are these professional users? Is it indoor? Is it outdoor? Is it rough surface? Is it cold climate? These aspects, and you need to maintain these aspects also in your packaging. And we see a lot of errors in certification that people run to what you can call formal non-compliance. They forget the right content on labeling. They forget the right content in a manual. They want to rush to the market, but there is a requirement for a manual. There are requirements for labels. But we didn't calculate that into the cost. Market surveillance authorities will say, well, we looked into the annex of the regulation, and the reason I forgot to calculate in the cost is not a good reason. Sorry, it's not an excuse.
Yeah.
God damn, I need to repack, I need to relabel. So the product is a product with the packaging. That is my argument.
Yeah, that's something I bet many people don't think about, and also the example with how the marketing can reposition your product in a different category, and you need to make sure that it fulfills the requirements in that category. That is very, very interesting.
So the product is a product including the packaging, and you are ready for market, not only because you have the product ready. Sometimes you need to register your product somewhere. You need to upload a certificate somewhere, or you need to notify your brand and article numbers at the recycling industry. And these things you can prepare. These are business aspects that are switched on because you move into a certain product category. And I mentioned earlier the example of the desk. Let's assume that you and I run a 100-year-long family business making beautiful desks. And we are fantastic wood finishers. And suddenly one of our employees comes with a great idea. We drill a hole in the desk and we put a cheat charger in there. What a fantastic idea. We just drill a hole. We know how to drill holes. We buy the cheat charger and we put it there. Now we fix this cheat charger with some kind of glue and you cannot take it out of the desk. God damn, the whole desk becomes electronic. The whole weight of the desk I need to pay for recycling. Why didn't we make it modular so I can take it out? This cheat charger is communicating with the telephone. It's a smart charger. My God, we are in the radio equipment directive. We need to have a different declaration of conformity. We need to have the declaration of conformity online or make it available in the manual. We need to have things on the packaging. My God, is that too complex? No, not from a product design. We just buy a cheat charger that is already certified. But the product type ticks certain boxes in the business part. And many people, when you talk about hardware business, commenting around certification, we are engineers and we focus on the product and we don't look at the packaging and we don't look at the business case. And these two things we can already start in the early days. Regardless of the EMC approval, we need to register a brand and an article, and we maybe need to become a member of a recycling industry, not only for this, but also for future articles. So be aware, you move into a certain product, and suddenly you need to activate new layers into your business.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very, very good example with the desk there. Seemingly small change that really changes a lot when it comes to the business.
Very easy. Yeah.
And just to round off, I think we've been touching on this already, but in which ways can ProductIP assist people when it comes to compliance? I would really like you to make the case for how you can help so that people can go to your website and check out the offering that you have.
Yeah, well, I think in the beginning of the design process, you can have this regulatory checklist within a few minutes, and all it takes is to buy 2 credits. So for less than 80 euros, you will have this checklist that is basically a pillar for your project. And the only thing that is an additional thing that is very relevant is you can put the time on there, the time to market. ProductIP is the only regulatory database that looks at what kind of regulations and standards are relevant in time. So you can already make a list today, based on what we know today, for the end date of your product or for your end date of your project in 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that list, we will monitor the relevancy. So now at day one, you have a meeting, we have an idea, we have a brainstorm, you make that relevant checklist. And basically, what you do is you search for the functional modules like the desk and Qi charger, and we merge it in a list. And if you cannot find the project within 2 to 3 days, we follow up on you and we have it. Okay? And behind that is a world of information. It's like compliance clips that we have written, templates, questionnaires. We have smart forms that can help you via a tablet to take pictures of an item and consider different kind of risks based on our analysis of different recalls in the market. So you start learning on the job. Again, we have come up with the questions that you cannot think about. But when we present you the question, as an engineer or product designer, you will be able to answer the question. And that is key. And then further along in the project, you start to open that requirement list via an invite with one or more potential supplying partners. And then they need to upload the compliance evidence that they have already against that list. And we have made tools that analyze that document and that can make a suggestion, okay, this document matches with what we see from standard ABC in our requirement list, so you can check those boxes off. And that whole process, what we do in ProductIP, that whole process is one-on-one the process that you should do to get Ultimo to a CE conformity. Mm-hmm. It is the whole process. So it has a timeline and it proves your effort. Because in Europe, it says, if you follow this prescribed process and all those steps, if you can prove the effort and you have used the harmonized standards that we all agreed on are relevant for the risk, if it still goes wrong, you are not liable. You need to help to sort out the problem, but you have followed a framework in Europe where we agree on that there are risks for consumer products. There's common risk. We can stumble. Life is not without risk. And that's the beautiful part of the European framework. They will say, follow these steps, prove that you have followed them, and you are not liable for neglect. You have done what we expect you to do. So you can also get insurance, etc., etc. And ProductIP helps that. There are free sessions that we have, what we call Compliance Tuesdays. We already have that 8 years. You can compare it with what Apple does in their stores. We always felt if you want to help people to change from A to B, and change could also be from never look at product compliance to now taking product compliance as part of your development product, you should take people by the hand. And the Compliance Tuesday sessions are for that. We will start in the next months with the Compliance TV. We're not really sure about that name, but we will have every Tuesday a brief session of 15 to 30 minutes online for different sections, on top of a recall that is relevant to demonstrate what has gone wrong there and how to improve. We are there to learn. We love product compliance, and our approach is always one-to-many. So the questions that people have are relevant for many in the market, and we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, I really enjoy your hand-holding nature here. And you say, the process itself, it's not impossible for somebody to do. It's when you see the questions, they make sense. It's just hard to find the questions, and I really enjoy how ProductIP helps bring those questions to light.
Yeah, and if in a later stage there are issues with I have all kind of documents, but I have trouble in getting them organized, or this is the first time I have done it, can somebody review my work, or I have trouble reaching with my manufacturers and explaining to them what they want to do. There's different grades of additional services that you can buy into. I think still at a very reasonable cost, because it's always cheaper than hire people. But our aim is that people can do it by themselves. We don't want to be a factory for people doing compliance for them. The supply chain should be able to do product compliance. And if you are running into a manufacturer who says, listen, I am the best power supply manufacturer on the world, and very soon after you start, you think, this guy don't know diddly do about power supplies. What the hell? I ask him simple questions, and he always waves them away. Why? If you are in the power supply business, you should be supportive and should be able to answer this. Move away from them. Move away. You know.
Yeah.
To be able to have a compliant product as part of the route to market, we see that people and organizations that get a hang of that get a better time to market, much better. Because you think you save a lot of time in the beginning, but as you said before, you will lose a lot of time in the end when you don't have time, when you already sold it and you need to change the tooling and you need to test again, etc., etc. Because if you are in a hurry, things become expensive as well.
Very, very true. And which compliance types does ProductIP work with?
Sorry, which compliance?
Compliance types. So you obviously help with a CE mark of guiding people to obtain that and self-certify. Are there other marks that ProductIP helps with?
Well, we are not an interface to laboratories. We do know a lot of laboratories, and we can recommend them, and we can even help you sometimes to figure out what would be the relevant chemical test to ask for to save some costs. So we are not in between the actually testing part. We focus on the EU market as such, and there are various markets in the world where the documentations that you have for Europe can actually open doors. For example, to export to the Middle East or to certain African countries, where they ask an import license but accept the EN standards. And then we can partner with companies that can give you such an export license for that, like Nemco in Norway. They're very famous for being able to give you export license to, for example, Saudi Arabia or Qatar for these kind of markets based on a technical file that you create in ProductIP. But we will always step out of that process. We will recommend them. We will facilitate that you can cooperate with the files that you have. But I don't want to be in the financial part of that. It's their business, it's their service. But we do cooperate in, let's say, in a triangular way. If I recommend people and I hear later from my customers that they were not satisfied with the services, then either something was wrong with the expectations or there was really something wrong with the services. We are not often guiding for markets like the US in terms of certification. We would always recommend organize your information in ProductIP, because a professional somewhere in the supply chain looking at organized information will be very happy. Saves a lot of time for him to digest what you actually want to test. It's much better to have an organized file in ProductIP, even if it's a base file for any of the non-EU markets, than to say to somebody in UL or CSA, okay, I'm not sure what you're asking, but let me send you everything I got. Okay, looking at everything you got will cost you $1,000 for sure or more. So for the other non-EU regions, stay organized. But for the EU, for those products that you need a declaration of conformity, when you make a file, you can generate one with a click of the mouse in any of the 21 languages at no extra cost. The file can cover all the 27 countries at no extra cost. The file can cover the whole family of products from one supplier, the different power ratings, the different colors at no extra cost. So our business model is based on the query that you do, and not on actually the matter of complexity, what is in there. And the business model is there. If you are successful and want to sell more and want to sell again, you probably have a question about product compliance, and if we provide the answer, we can charge you a little bit. And that is actually what you can call the subscription. Your success is the subscription to the need for more information on our platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining and answering some of these naive questions around certification and compliance. And thank you also for co-founding ProductIP. It really is a guiding rail for people who are just starting out to learn about compliance and need a way to structure their thinking and ask the right questions. So thank you.
You're welcome. We love product compliance.
Perfect. And I'll link to your website so that everybody can check it out. And even if you are not developing for the EU market, you can then organize your files using ProductIP, and
Sure.
your suppliers
We
will
have base files for
be happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, I'll bid you farewell, Casper. And yeah, until next time.